Imagine walking into a medieval church and seeing something extraordinary. A wooden statue of a woman, her oversized hands cradling what appears to be a miniature adult on her lap. Today, we're exploring one of Christianity's most fascinating artistic and theological mysteries, Mary as the throne of wisdom. We'll uncover why these ancient sculptures were designed this way, what they meant to medieval believers, and how they continue to influence religious art and thought today.
You know, what's really fascinating about these sculptures is that they weren't just static art pieces. They were actually designed to be mobile.
Mobile? What do you mean by that?
Well, these sculptures, which typically stood about 3 to 4 feet tall, were carried in religious processions during feast days. They were literally paraded through medieval streets during times of war, famine, or disease.
That's incredible. So they were really part of people's lived experience of faith.
Exactly. And there are historical accounts of crowds desperately trying to touch these sculptures as they passed by, with cymbals clashing in the background. It was quite a spectacle.
But let's back up a bit. Where did this whole concept of Mary as the throne of wisdom come from?
The title actually originated in the 11th century. It's deeply rooted in the idea that Christ is divine wisdom incarnate, and since Mary carried him in her lap, she became, quite literally, the throne upon which wisdom sat.
That's such a powerful metaphor.
And it goes even deeper. In medieval theology, Mary wasn't just a passive throne, she was seen as possessing profound wisdom herself.
How so?
Well, according to Cardinal Newman's writings, Mary spent 30 years in close conversation with Jesus. Think about that. 3 decades of direct dialogue with divine wisdom itself.
That's fascinating. So they believed she gained extraordinary knowledge through this relationship?
Exactly. The belief was that she would have learned about creation, the universe, and history directly from Christ himself. Some even believed she exceeded philosophers in knowledge and prophets in spiritual insight.
You know what's really interesting to me? The way this theological concept was expressed in medieval art.
Oh yes, and one of the most stunning examples is Chartres Cathedral in France.
Tell me about that.
Well, from the central crossing of Chartres Cathedral, you could originally look in 4 directions and see 4 different depictions of Mary in the medieval stained glass windows.
What were these different depictions?
To the west, she was enthroned in heaven. To the north, she appeared as a child with the prophets. To the east, there was the Annunciation. And to the south, she was crowned in glory with the Christ child.
That's incredible architectural symbolism.
And you know what's particularly interesting about the actual Throne of Wisdom sculptures themselves?
What's that?
The way Mary's hands were deliberately made oversized. It wasn't a mistake, it was meant to direct viewers' attention to Christ, who was depicted as wisdom incarnate.
That's such a clever artistic choice. Were there other symbolic elements in these sculptures?
Yes, many of them had cavities behind the shoulder, suggesting they were also reliquaries, containers for holy relics. So they served multiple devotional purposes.
You mentioned earlier about how they looked. Can you describe the style more specifically?
The Romanesque style was very rigid and formal, strictly frontal with expressionless faces. Both figures wore simple tunics with repetitive ripple patterns, creating a very symmetrical appearance.
But that style changed over time, right?
Yes, it evolved quite dramatically. In the Gothic period, Mary became more approachable, depicted as a beautiful young queen standing in an S-curve, holding a more naturalistic baby Jesus on her hip.
That's such a striking change in artistic representation.
And originally, these sculptures would have been quite colourful. They were painted and decorated with tin leaf, and the more elaborate ones even had gold or silver leaf and precious gems.
So very different from how we see them today in museums.
Exactly. We often forget that medieval religious art was incredibly vibrant and colourful.
Let's talk about the theological significance of this title, Seat of Wisdom. How does it relate to other Marian titles?
Well, it's fascinating because it's connected to the fundamental title Theotokos, or God-bearer, which was officially declared at the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD.
That's quite early in Christian history.
Yes, and it was actually quite controversial at the time. There was a major theological debate about whether Mary should be called the Mother of God or just the Mother of Christ.
Why was that such a big deal?
Because it wasn't just about Mary, it was about the nature of Christ himself. If Mary was the Mother of God, it meant that Jesus was fully divine from the moment of his conception.
So it was really about defining core Christian beliefs.
Exactly. And this understanding of Mary as Theotokos laid the groundwork for later titles like Seat of Wisdom.
You know what I find interesting? How these medieval concepts continue to influence religious art and thought today.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, as recently as 2002, Pope John Paul II commissioned a modern mosaic of Mary, Seat of Wisdom, to be given to university students worldwide.
What was the purpose behind that?
It was meant to encourage the maintenance of Christian tradition in places of higher learning, showing how this ancient concept of wisdom remains relevant in modern education.
That's fascinating, bridging medieval and modern understanding.
And, even today, many Catholic universities and institutions continue to use this imagery. The Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium has the Sedes Sapientiae on its seal.
That's quite a legacy for a medieval concept.
And it's still evolving. The Vatican's Doctrine Office is actually releasing a new document about Mary's roles and titles this year.
Really? What's prompting that?
There's ongoing theological discussion about how to understand and express Mary's role in salvation history for contemporary believers.
So these medieval concepts are still being actively discussed and debated.
Yes, and that's what makes this topic so fascinating. It's not just historical, it's a living tradition that continues to evolve and find new expression.
Let's talk about the practical impact. How did these images affect medieval believers?
They were incredibly important in daily religious life. Remember, in a largely illiterate society, these images were teaching tools.
Like a visual theology lesson.
Exactly. And they weren't just static images, they were objects of devotion that people could touch and interact with during processions.
That's such a different experience from how we encounter religious art today.
Yes, though some communities still maintain these traditions. There are places in Europe where processional sculptures are still used in religious festivals.
So as we wrap up our discussion today, what do you think is the most important thing for people to understand about Mary as the throne of wisdom?
I think it's the way this title combines the physical and the spiritual. Mary physically held wisdom, Christ, in her lap, but she also embodied wisdom through her understanding and faith.
And that dual nature is reflected in the art we've discussed.
Exactly. The physical sculptures point to spiritual truths, just as Mary herself points us toward divine wisdom.